Please, no. I beg you, don't do this. I'm scared. Please, I don't want to die.
The barrel of the gun trembled in my hand. Not from fear. Never again from fear. No. My hand shook from 7 years of patience finally reaching its end. 7 years of climbing from nothing. 7 years of becoming everything he said I could never be. Lazarus Vane knelt before me now, his designer suit stained with the blood of his fallen empire, his silver hair matted against his forehead, those cold mercury eyes that once haunted my nightmares now wet with something I had never witnessed in them before. Terror. Pure, unfiltered terror. "Please," he whispered, and the words sounded foreign on his tongue, like a language he had forgotten how to speak. "Please, Stellan." I pressed the barrel harder against his temple. Outside these floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled beneath us like a kingdom of lights. His kingdom once. Mine now. "Say it again," I commanded, my voice steady as stone. "Say my name again. The name you spat out like garbage when you left me bleeding in that warehouse. The name you laughed at when you told your men I was nothing but a street rat they could dispose of whenever they got bored with me." A single tear escaped his eye. Lazarus Vane, the man who controlled half the underworld, the billionaire whose legitimate businesses served as nothing more than elegant masks for an empire built on blood and suffering, was crying. "Stellan," he breathed. "Stellan Vega. I was wrong about you. You were wrong about everything." But as my finger tightened on the trigger, as 7 years of pain and fury reached their crescendo, the door behind us burst open, and a voice I never expected to hear again cut through the darkness. "Stop!" And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my past, about my revenge, about the monster kneeling before me, shattered into a million pieces. Before I tell you how this moment came to be, before I explain why the most powerful crime lord in the nation was begging for his life at my feet, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to when I was nothing but a ghost in the city's shadows, invisible to everyone who mattered, surviving on scraps and sheer will. But first, I need to know something. Tell me where you're watching this from right now. Drop your location in the comments below. I want to know how far this story is traveling, because what I'm about to share with you is something I've never told anyone. And if this resonates with you, if you want to witness how a boy with nothing became the man who brought an empire to its knees, subscribe right now and stay with me until the end. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I was 17 when I learned that hunger has its own sound. It's not the growling of an empty stomach that movies make you believe. No, real hunger is quieter than that. It's the ringing in your ears when you haven't eaten in 4 days. It's the way the world starts to blur at the edges like a photograph left too long in the sun. It's the hollow echo of your own heartbeat when you're lying on cardboard beneath an overpass, wondering if tonight is the night your body finally gives up. My mother's name was Esperanza, which means hope. The irony was never lost on me. She died when I was 9, and she took every shred of hope with her. My father, if you could call him that, was just a shadow that occasionally passed through our apartment, leaving bruises on my mother and empty bottles on the counter. He disappeared completely after she was gone, probably found some other life to ruin. The foster system swallowed me whole. I bounced between 7 homes in 4 years. Some were merely neglectful. Others were nightmares I still can't speak about without feeling my throat close up. When I finally ran away at 15, it wasn't an escape. It was simply choosing one form of survival over another. The streets of Meridian City became my teacher. They taught me how to read people, how to spot the difference between a mark who would just keep walking and one who would call the cops. They taught me where to sleep so I wouldn't wake up with a knife at my throat. They taught me that kindness was a currency more valuable than money because it was infinitely rarer. I fell in with a crew of other forgotten kids. We weren't a gang, nothing that organized. We were just survivors who had realized that together we might actually make it through another winter. There was Orion, a boy 2 years older than me who could pick any lock ever manufactured. Celestine, a girl with fire-red hair and a gift for talking her way out of any situation. Benicio, barely 13 but already harder than concrete, with eyes that had seen too much. We looked out for each other. That's what nobody tells you about life on the streets. The movies show violence and drugs and desperation. And yes, all of that exists. But there's also community. There's also love, in its own broken and beautiful way. I thought I understood the darkness of our city. I thought I had seen the worst of what human beings could do to each other. I was catastrophically wrong. The night everything changed started like any other. We had scored moderately well that week, enough to afford a room in one of those motels that asked no questions as long as you paid in cash. We were celebrating in our own small way, sharing a pizza that Celestine had somehow charmed out of a delivery driver. Then Orion didn't come back. He had gone out for cigarettes, a habit we all told him would kill him someday. When 2 hours passed with no word, I went looking. The streets were quieter than usual that night. It felt like the city itself was holding its breath. I found him in an alley 3 blocks away. What I witnessed there changed the trajectory of my entire existence. 4 men stood over a kneeling figure. Even from the mouth of the alley, I could see it was Orion, could recognize the leather jacket I had given him for his birthday. But what held my attention, what froze the blood in my veins, was the man standing slightly apart from the others. He was tall, impossibly elegant, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than I would see in a lifetime. His hair was silver, swept back from a face that might have been handsome, if not for the emptiness in his eyes. Those eyes glowed like mercury in the dim light, reflecting nothing, feeling nothing. Lazarus Vane. I didn't know his name yet, but I would never forget his face. He was speaking in a voice as smooth as aged whiskey. "You stole from me, boy. Not the money, that means nothing. But you stole from me. And that is an insult I cannot allow to go unanswered." Orion was crying. I had never seen him cry. Not once. Not even when he told me about his mother selling him to pay for her addiction. But he was crying now, blubbering apologies that the man in the suit listened to with the bored expression of someone watching an insect struggle against a window. "Please, I didn't know it was yours. I swear I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. But ignorance, unfortunately, is not a defense." He nodded to one of his men. The sound that followed, the sharp crack, and then the silence, is something I will carry with me into whatever comes after this life. Orion's body crumpled to the ground, and just like that, the only person who had ever felt like a brother to me was gone. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, something that betrayed my presence, because suddenly, those mercury eyes were fixed on the entrance of the alley. Fixed on me. "Well, well," Lazarus Vane said, and a smile curved across his face. It was the coldest expression I had ever seen. "It seems we have a witness." I ran. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life, my worn-out sneakers slapping against the pavement, my lungs burning, my mind screaming at me to go faster, faster, faster. Behind me, I heard shouts, heard footsteps pursuing, But the streets were my home. Every shortcut, every hiding spot, every gap in every fence was burned into my memory. I twisted through alleys and scrambled over walls and squeezed through spaces that grown men couldn't follow. When I finally stopped running, when I collapsed behind a dumpster in the industrial district and pressed my hands over my mouth to muffle my sobbing, I thought I had escaped. I didn't know that Lazarus Vane never let anyone escape. I didn't know that in his world, a witness was a loose end, and loose ends were unacceptable. I didn't know that within 24 hours, every resource at his considerable disposal would be focused on finding me. And I certainly didn't know that when he did find me, he wouldn't simply kill me. He had something far worse in mind. They came for me 3 days later. I was in the warehouse where our crew had been hiding, trying to keep Celestine and Benicio calm, trying to figure out how to tell them about Orion when I still couldn't believe it myself. The door exploded inward. Men in black poured through like a flood of shadows. Celestine screamed. Benicio grabbed the knife he always kept hidden, but someone hit him across the face before he could use it. I tried to run, tried to reach the back exit, but a blow to the back of my head turned the world into static. I woke in a place that smelled like rust and old blood. My wrists were bound to a metal chair. My head throbbed, and sitting across from me, legs crossed with casual elegance, was Lazarus Vane. "Stellan Vega," he said, pronouncing my name like he was tasting an unfamiliar wine. "That is your name, yes? The street rat who witnessed my indiscretion." I said nothing. My throat was too tight with fear to form words. "I've been watching you," he continued. "In the days since our unfortunate encounter, you're quite resourceful. The way you evaded my men, the way you move through this city like a ghost, it's impressive for someone so young. So very disposable." He leaned forward, and the emptiness in his eyes seemed to deepen. "I'm going to give you a choice, Stellan. A gift, really. You can die right now, quickly and relatively painlessly. Or you can serve me. Become one of my soldiers. Learn to channel that survival instinct into something useful." I found my voice then, though it came out cracked and barely audible. "You killed Orion. I eliminated a thief who made the mistake of stealing from the wrong person. Yes. He was like a brother to me. Then he should have taught you better than to form attachments." Lazarus stood, adjusting the cuffs of his pristine shirt. "What is your answer, street rat?" I looked up at him. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The fear didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else, something harder, something that would sustain me through everything that came next. "Go to hell," I said. He smiled, not with anger, but with something that almost looked like approval. "The third option it is, then. I had hoped you would choose this." "Third option?" "I'm going to break you, Stellan Vega. Not kill you. Break you. I'm going to take everything you are, everything you believe yourself to be, and I'm going to shatter it until there's nothing left but obedience. And when I'm finished, you're going to beg for the privilege of serving me." What followed was a year of systematic destruction. There's no other way to describe it. Lazarus Vane and his men set about breaking me with the same methodical precision they applied to every aspect of their business. The physical pain was almost the easy part. The beatings, the deprivation, the days left in darkness and cold. The human body is remarkably adaptable. It learns to metabolize agony, to store it somewhere deep where it can be accessed later as fuel. The psychological warfare was worse. They told me Celestine and Benicio were dead, killed because of me. They showed me photographs, police reports that looked horrifyingly real. They made me believe I had destroyed everyone I loved. And then, when they thought I was at my lowest, they would offer me relief. Food, warmth, kindness. All I had to do was say the words. All I had to do was submit. I never did. Every time they thought they had reached my breaking point, they found instead a core of defiance they couldn't touch. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was my mother's blood in my veins, the woman who endured my father's abuse for years just to protect me. Maybe it was the streets themselves, which had taught me that survival wasn't about strength. It was about endurance. It was about outlasting whatever tried to destroy you. Lazarus became fascinated with me. That was the strangest part. What had begun as routine elimination of a witness transformed into something like obsession. He would visit my cell personally, sit across from me in the darkness, and talk for hours. "You remind me of myself," he said one night, and there was something almost like honesty in his voice. "When I was young, before I understood the rules of this world. We're nothing alike," I spat through split lips. "No? I was a street rat too, once. Did you know that? Nobody knows that. The carefully crafted mythology of Lazarus Vane begins with Harvard Business School and venture capital and all the respectable masks. But before that, before I became this, I was just like you, Stellan. Hungry, forgotten, invisible. The difference is you became a monster. The difference is I became successful. In this world, those are the same thing." He leaned closer, his mercury eyes searching my face. "You have it in you too. I can see it. That darkness, that capacity for ruthlessness. You're just too stubborn to embrace it. I would rather die than become like you." He laughed softly. "That's what I love about you. That fire. But everyone breaks eventually. Even the strongest stone crumbles with enough pressure." But he was wrong. For 12 months, they tried everything. And for 12 months, I held on. I held on to the memory of my mother's voice singing me to sleep. I held on to Orion's laugh, to Celestine's fierce protectiveness, to Benicio's quiet courage. I held on to the fundamental truth that they could control my body, but they would never touch my soul. And then, one day, without warning, they let me go. I woke up in an alley, alone, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the scars that now covered my body. No explanation, no message, just freedom, sudden and inexplicable. It took me weeks to understand what had happened. Lazarus had grown bored, or perhaps he had achieved a different kind of victory than he intended. He had studied me, learned my limits, mapped every corner of my psyche. He knew me better than anyone alive, and in the end, I think he released me as an experiment. He wanted to see what I would become. He wanted to see if the street rat he had tried so hard to break would simply disappear back into the gutters, or if I would do something interesting. And I was determined to do something very interesting indeed. The first thing I discovered was that Celestine and Benicio were alive. The photographs, the reports, all of it had been fabricated. They had escaped Meridian City during my captivity, fled to the coast, built new lives for themselves under assumed names. Finding them took me 3 months and every skill I possessed. But when I finally knocked on the door of a small apartment in San Francisco, and Celestine opened it, and I saw the shock and joy explode across her face, I felt something I thought had died inside me. Hope. Real hope. Not just the name of a woman who had been taken too soon. She held me while I cried, held me and whispered that it was over, that I was safe, that we were all going to be okay. But I knew it wasn't over. It would never be over, not as long as Lazarus Vane drew breath. He had taken Orion from me. He had tried to destroy my very identity. He was still out there, still building his empire on the bones of the forgotten and the vulnerable. And somewhere during those 12 months in his captivity, a plan had begun to form in my mind. A plan so audacious, so seemingly impossible, that it could only be conceived by someone who had already lost everything, and therefore had nothing left to fear. I was going to destroy Lazarus Vane. Not just kill him, destroy him. Take everything he had built and burn it to ash around him. Make him feel exactly what he had made me feel. I was going to become powerful enough to make a billionaire beg. But first, I needed to become someone new. The transformation took 7 years. 7 years of meticulous planning, relentless work, and calculated risks that would have made most people's blood run cold. 7 years of becoming someone that Stellan Vega, the starving street kid, would never have recognized. Celestine helped me forge new documents, a new identity. I became Sebastian Raine, an orphan from Portland with a hunger for success and nothing tying me to Meridian City. I enrolled in community college, discovered that my years on the streets had given me a talent for reading people that translated surprisingly well into business strategy. I devoured every textbook, every lecture, every piece of knowledge I could get my hands on. Let me pause here and ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to completely reinvent yourself? Where you looked in the mirror and decided that the person staring back wasn't strong enough to achieve what needed to be done? Tell me in the comments. Tell me about your transformation. Because I believe that every one of us has within us the capacity to become something greater than we are. We just need the right motivation. Mine was fury. Cold, patient, diamond-hard fury that I kept locked in my chest like a nuclear reactor. It powered every late night of studying, every networking event where I smiled and shook hands with people who would have stepped over my dying body in the streets. Every calculated move up the ladder of legitimacy. I graduated top of my class, caught the attention of a venture capital firm, demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to identify promising investments and struggling companies that could be turned around. Within 3 years, I had made my first million. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Not until I had enough power to face Lazarus Vane as an equal. So I kept climbing. I made alliances with people who mattered. I cultivated relationships with politicians, with journalists, with law enforcement. I learned that in the world of the truly powerful, information was the most valuable currency. And I began to collect information about the Vane Empire with the obsessive dedication of a scholar compiling a life's work. Lazarus Vane's criminal organization was like an iceberg. The legitimate businesses everyone could see were just the tip. Beneath the surface lay a massive infrastructure of illegal operations. Drug trafficking, human smuggling, protection rackets, money laundering on a scale that made Swiss banks nervous. He had politicians in his pocket, judges on his payroll, law enforcement officials who owed him favors that could never be repaid. Taking down an empire like that would require more than money. It would require leverage, evidence, witnesses willing to testify, and someone on the inside. That's when I found Seraphina Valdez. She walked into my office on a Tuesday afternoon, seeking investment for a tech startup that was obviously a front for something else. I had learned to spot money laundering operations from a mile away. What I hadn't expected was the intelligence in her dark eyes, or the subtle desperation hidden beneath her polished exterior. Seraphina was Lazarus Vane's accountant. Not officially, of course. On paper, she was the CFO of one of his legitimate holdings. But her actual job was making sure that rivers of dirty money flowed invisibly through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. She was also, as I would soon discover, desperately looking for a way out. Our first meeting was a dance of careful evasion. She pretended her startup was legitimate. I pretended to believe her. But something passed between us, some unspoken recognition of two people who were both wearing masks. A week later, she showed up at my apartment at midnight, trembling with fear. "I know who you are," she said. "I know what he did to you." My blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Stellan Vega. He kept files on everyone who ever resisted him. Photographs, videos, detailed accounts of everything he did to try to break them. I've seen your file. I know what you survived." I should have denied it, should have maintained the cover I had spent years constructing. But something in her face, some echo of the same hopelessness I had once felt, made me tell the truth. "Why are you here?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Because I want him destroyed too. Because he has my brother. He's had him for 3 years, and every day I do what he says is another day my brother survives. But I can't do this anymore. I can't help him ruin more lives. I would rather die than continue being part of his machine." That night, Seraphina told me everything. Every account, every shell company, every bribed official, every secret that Lazarus Vane had spent decades protecting. She gave me the blueprints to his entire empire, and in exchange, I promised her something I had never promised anyone. I would save her brother, and I would make Lazarus Vane pay for every life he had destroyed. But there was something neither of us expected, something that would complicate everything. We fell in love. It wasn't supposed to happen. Romance was a luxury I had convinced myself I couldn't afford. Every relationship was a potential vulnerability, a pressure point that could be exploited. I had seen what Lazarus did to people with attachments. Yet somehow, in the late nights spent planning and the quiet moments stolen between strategy sessions, Seraphina became more than an ally. She saw through every wall I had built. She had witnessed the files, knew the horrors I had endured, and instead of pity, she offered understanding. She had her own scars, her own nightmares, her own unbreakable core that had survived years of serving a monster. We were two damaged souls who had somehow found each other in the darkness. And that love gave me something I hadn't possessed before, something beyond fury, beyond vengeance. It gave me a reason to survive what came next. The plan we devised was elegant in its complexity. We would attack Lazarus Vane on every front simultaneously. Financial evidence delivered to the FBI. Testimonies from victims coordinated with investigative journalists. Cyber attacks on his digital infrastructure. And at the center of it all, a corporate takeover so aggressive and unexpected that he wouldn't realize what was happening until it was too late. But first, we had to rescue Seraphina's brother. His name was Elias, and he was being held at a private estate upstate, one of Lazarus's many properties. Seraphina had managed to gather intelligence on the security protocols, the shift changes, the blind spots in the surveillance system. "I'm going with you," she insisted when I told her I would handle the extraction. "Absolutely not. If something goes wrong..." "He's my brother, Stellan. I've spent 3 years being complicit in his captivity. I need to be the one to free him." There was no arguing with that fire in her eyes. So we went together. The night of the extraction was moonless and cold. We approached the estate through the forest, dressed in black, moving with the silence I had perfected on the streets of Meridian City. The security was formidable, but Seraphina's intelligence was flawless. We slipped through gaps in the patrol patterns, disabled cameras, neutralized guards with tranquilizers before they could raise an alarm. We found Elias in a basement cell. He was thin and pale and barely conscious. But when he saw his sister, something like life flickered back into his eyes. "Sarah?" he whispered. "Is this real?" "It's real, baby brother. We're getting you out." We were almost to the perimeter when everything went wrong. An alarm shrieked through the night. Lights blazed to life across the property. And a voice I had never forgotten. That smooth, whiskey voice that still haunted my worst dreams, crackled through a speaker system. "Stellan Vega, did you really think I wouldn't know you were coming?" Chaos erupted around us. Guards converged from every direction, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness like predatory searchlights. Seraphina screamed something I couldn't hear over the alarm. I grabbed Elias with one arm and her hand with the other, and we ran. We weren't going to make it. I knew it with the cold certainty of someone who had learned to calculate odds in split seconds. The perimeter fence was still 200 yards away, and they were closing in from all sides. So I made a choice. I shoved Seraphina and Elias toward a gap in the tree line where the shadows were deepest. "Go!" I commanded. "Don't look back. The car is half a mile north. Get to it and drive. Don't stop until you reach the safe house." "I'm not leaving you!" "If they catch all three of us, everything was for nothing. Your brother needs you. The plan needs you. Go!" There was a moment, just a heartbeat, where our eyes met. All the words we hadn't said, all the futures we had dared to imagine, hung between us in the cold night air. Then she was gone, pulling Elias into the darkness. I turned to face the approaching guards, raised my hands in surrender, and when they tackled me to the ground with excessive force, when they zip-tied my wrists and dragged me across the property like a sack of garbage, I was smiling, because they had captured me. And in their arrogance, in their certainty of victory, they would never realize that this was exactly where I needed to be. They brought me to the main house, a monument to obscene wealth that somehow managed to feel cold and dead despite all its luxury. And there, waiting in a study lined with leather-bound books and priceless art, was Lazarus Vane. He looked older than I remembered. 7 years had carved new lines into his face, threaded more silver through his hair. But those eyes were the same, those mercury eyes that reflected nothing. "Stellan Vega," he said, and there was wonder in his voice. "Look at you, all grown up. I've been watching your rise, you know. Sebastian Raine, the self-made business prodigy. Quite the transformation. You should have killed me when you had the chance." "Perhaps. But where would the entertainment be in that?" He circled me slowly, like a predator examining prey that had somehow become interesting. "I have to admit, I didn't expect you to come for the accountant's brother. Sentiment always was your weakness. And underestimating people was always yours." He laughed. It was the same cold laugh I remembered from that alley, from those endless months of captivity. "What exactly am I underestimating here? You're in my house, surrounded by my men, with absolutely no leverage. This isn't a business negotiation, street rat. This is an ending." "You're right," I said. "It is an ending. Just not the one you're imagining." I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, just for a moment, but it was there. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the 47 shell companies that were frozen this morning by federal order. I'm talking about the grand jury that's been convening in secret for the past 6 weeks, reviewing financial records that were anonymously provided by someone with intimate knowledge of your organization. I'm talking about the investigative piece dropping tomorrow in the New York Times. with testimony from 16 former victims of your trafficking operations. Lazarus's face went pale. It was the most satisfying thing I had ever witnessed. You're bluffing. Check your phone. He pulled out his cell with trembling hands, and I watched the color drain from his face as he scrolled through notification after notification. Accounts frozen. Assets seized. Associates arrested. The entire infrastructure of his empire crumbling in real time. "This is impossible," he breathed. "This took years to build. You couldn't have—" "I had 7 years. And I had help from people who wanted you destroyed almost as much as I did." I stepped closer, and for the first time in our entire history, he stepped back. "Did you really think you could spend decades destroying lives without someone eventually keeping score?" The gun appeared in his hand so fast I barely saw him move. He pressed it against my forehead, his breath ragged with fury. "I can still end you. Right here, right now. Kill you before any of this matters." "You could, but it won't change anything. The evidence is already distributed. The journalists have their stories. The FBI has their witnesses. Killing me just adds another charge to the indictment. You think I care about that? You think I won't burn everything down before I let them take it from me?" "No," I said quietly. "I don't think you will. Because despite everything you are, despite all the evil you've done, you're still a survivor, just like me. And survivors don't throw away their lives for revenge. They adapt. They endure. They find a way to keep going." The gun trembled against my skin. I could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the rage fighting with the calculating pragmatism that had kept him alive this long. And then, impossibly, he laughed. A real laugh, not the cold performance I was used to. "You magnificent bastard," he said. "You actually did it. The street rat who couldn't be broken actually brought down the empire." "Not yet, but I will." He lowered the gun. For a long moment, we just stood there. 2 men who had been locked in a war that most of the world never knew existed. "So what happens now?" he asked. "The police are coming, I assume. You have your victory. What else is there?" "I want you to know something," I said, "before they take you away. I want you to know that everything you believed about the world was wrong. You thought that power came from fear, that survival meant destroying everyone who got in your way, that attachment was weakness. And you're going to tell me that love conquers all? That the good guys win in the end? No. I'm going to tell you that you created me. You took a scared kid from the streets and you tried to turn him into a monster. But instead, you gave him purpose. You gave him motivation. You gave him the fire he needed to become something greater than either of us ever imagined." I leaned in close enough to see my reflection in those mercury eyes. "So thank you, Lazarus. Thank you for making me strong enough to destroy you." The aftermath was chaos. Federal agents swarmed the estate within the hour. Lazarus Vane was taken into custody, along with 37 of his top lieutenants. The news coverage was relentless, the story dominating every outlet for weeks. The downfall of a secret empire, the exposure of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government and business. And at the center of it all, a mysterious figure named Sebastian Raine, whose connection to the investigation remained deliberately unclear. I gave exactly 1 interview, anonymous and disguised, where I explained that I had been one of Vane's victims and had spent years gathering evidence. The sympathy the public showed for my story was overwhelming, but it was also a distraction. a way to keep the spotlight away from the woman and her brother who had risked everything to help me. Seraphina and Elias went into witness protection for the duration of the trial. I couldn't see her, couldn't contact her, couldn't even know where she was being kept safe. It was necessary for her protection, but those months of separation were harder than anything I had endured in captivity. Because now I had something to lose, someone to miss, a future I actually wanted to reach. The trial lasted 4 months. Lazarus Vane's lawyers were the best money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Seraphina's testimony alone would have been enough for conviction, but combined with the financial records, the victim statements, the documented pattern of violence and corruption, there was no possibility of escape. I was there for the verdict, sitting in the back row of a packed courtroom, watching as the judge read out guilty verdicts on 63 separate counts. Watching as Lazarus Vane, the man who had ruled an empire of shadows, was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. He saw me as they led him away in chains. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and something passed between us. Not forgiveness, never that. But perhaps understanding. Perhaps the recognition that our war was finally over. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt the glorious satisfaction of vengeance finally achieved. Instead, I felt empty, hollow, like an engine that had been running at maximum capacity for years and suddenly had nowhere to direct its power. What do you do with your life when revenge is complete? Seraphina found me on a beach 3 weeks later. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I had just started driving and didn't stop until I hit the ocean. But somehow, she knew. "You're a hard man to find when you want to be," she said, settling onto the sand beside me. "And you're very good at finding things that want to stay hidden." Years of practice. Comes with the accountant territory. We sat in silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. The salt air was clean in a way I had forgotten air could be. The sound of the water was the kind of peace I had never allowed myself to experience. "Elias is doing well," she said eventually. 3 months of therapy, good food, and distance from everything that happened. He's starting to remember who he was before. I'm glad. He's lucky to have you. He wants to meet you properly, when you're ready. Says he owes you his life. He owes me nothing. You took the real risks. You were the one who walked into the lion's den every day for years, gathering secrets while pretending to be loyal. She turned to look at me, and the afternoon light caught the amber flecks in her dark eyes. Is this what victory feels like? Because you look more defeated than you did when you were planning a war. I didn't answer for a long time. The question cut too close to something I hadn't wanted to examine. I spent 7 years becoming someone who could destroy Lazarus Vane. I finally said, every decision, every relationship, every moment was oriented around that goal. And now it's done. He's in a prison cell for the rest of his life. His empire is ash. His victims have justice. But I don't know who I am without that purpose. The street kid is gone. The Avenger completed his mission. What's left? Seraphina reached over and took my hand. Her fingers intertwined with mine, warm and alive and real. Whatever you want to be next, that's what's left. I looked down at our joined hands. Hers were elegant, with calluses from years of writing and typing. Mine were scarred, marked by violence, old and new. Together, they looked like a map of everything we had survived. I don't know how to want things for myself, I admitted. I know how to survive. I know how to fight. I know how to channel pain into purpose. But just living? Being happy? That wasn't supposed to be part of the story. Then we write a new story, she said. Together. She leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and slow and tasted like salt from the sea spray, like possibility, like the first page of a chapter I had never dared to imagine. When we pulled apart, I found myself smiling. A real smile, not the calculated expression I had worn like armor for so many years. A smile that came from somewhere deep inside, somewhere I thought had been killed a long time ago. I should warn you, I said. I have no idea what a normal life looks like. Neither do I. We'll figure it out as we go. I still have nightmares. Every night. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm back in that cell, or back on the streets, or back in that alley watching Orion die. I have nightmares too. About the things I helped him do. About the people I couldn't save. We're both pretty damaged. We're both survivors. That's not the same thing. I looked out at the ocean, at the endless expanse of blue that seemed to promise that the world was bigger than the shadows I had lived in for so long. At the horizon where the water met the sky and everything became possibility. Okay, I said. Let's write a new story. But life, as I had learned through brutal experience, never gives you exactly the ending you expect. 2 weeks after Seraphina found me on that beach, after we had begun tentatively building something that felt like a future, a message arrived. It was hand-delivered by a private courier, sealed with wax, addressed to Stellan Vega. Not Sebastian Raine. My real name. The message was simple. A time, an address, and 3 words that made my blood run cold. I know everything. The address led to a private hospital an hour outside the city. Seraphina insisted on coming with me, armed with the gun she had learned to use during our planning days, and a fierce determination I knew better than to argue with. What we found there was the last thing either of us expected. Lazarus Vane's wife. I hadn't even known he was married. In all my years of research, all the intelligence gathering, there had never been any mention of a spouse. But the woman waiting in that hospital room, silver-haired and fragile, and hooked up to machines that beeped out the rhythm of a failing heart, was unmistakably connected to him. Her name was Vittoria, and she wanted to tell me a story. Sit, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the iron authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Both of you. What I have to say will take time, and I don't have much of it left. We sat, and Vittoria Vane told us the truth about her husband. Lazarus had not always been a monster. Once, decades ago, he had been a boy very much like me. A street kid with nothing, trying to survive in a city that wanted him dead. He had been kind once, capable of love, capable of laughter. And then he had watched his entire family slaughtered by a rival gang. His parents, his younger sister, his grandmother who had raised him when no one else would. All of them murdered while he hid in a closet, too terrified to move, too young to fight back. That's when it started, Vittoria said, tears tracking down her weathered cheeks. The emptiness you saw in his eyes. He decided that night that the only way to survive was to become so powerful that no one could ever hurt him again. To be the one who caused fear, rather than the one who felt it. It was a familiar story. Too familiar. I looked at my own scarred hands and wondered how close I had come to the same transformation. I married him before he became what he is now. Vittoria continued. I thought I could save him, that my love could fill the void where his heart used to be. But some damage goes too deep to repair with love alone. By the time I realized that, I was already trapped. He had already built his empire, and I was too afraid to leave. Why are you telling us this? Seraphina asked. Vittoria's fading eyes fixed on me. Because I watched your file. I watched the recordings of everything he did to you, trying to break you. And I saw something in you that I recognized. The same potential for darkness. The same path that my husband walked. I'm nothing like him. You could have been. After everything he did to you, after a year of torture, you had every right to become exactly what he was. To let the hatred consume you. To become a monster in pursuit of destroying another monster. She reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so close to death. But you didn't. You chose love. You chose allies instead of armies. You chose to destroy his evil, not to create your own. I didn't know what to say. The revelation was too enormous to process. There's something else, Vittoria said. Something that will change everything. She gestured toward a folder on her bedside table. Seraphina retrieved it, handed it to me. Inside were documents, photographs, and a birth certificate that made no sense. A birth certificate with my name on it. Stellan Vega, born to Esperanza Vega, and Lazarus Vane. The world tilted. I heard Seraphina gasp beside me, felt her hand on my arm, but it all seemed very far away. Your mother worked for my husband, long before I met him, Vittoria explained. They had an affair. When she became pregnant, she ran, changed her identity, tried to disappear. He searched for years, but by the time he found her, she was already dead. And then he found you. No. The word came out choked, barely human. No, that's not possible. He tortured me. He tried to break me. He didn't know who you were. Not until after he let you go. One of his men ran a DNA test on blood you left behind. When the results came back, something in him shifted. Not toward love. He wasn't capable of that anymore. But perhaps toward curiosity. Perhaps toward the hope that his own child might succeed where he had failed. Might find a way back to humanity that was forever closed to him. I stood up so fast the chair fell over. I wanted to run, wanted to escape this room and these revelations and everything they meant. But Seraphina was there, her arms around me, her voice in my ear. Breathe. Just breathe. You are not defined by your blood. You are defined by your choices. He's my father, I said, and the words tasted like poison. The man who killed Orion. The man who built an empire on suffering. He's my father. And you're the one who destroyed him, Vittoria said. You're the one who ended the legacy of violence. You broke the cycle, Stellan. Don't you see? That's the whole point. That's why I'm telling you this. Not to burden you, but to free you. I looked at her. This dying woman who had lived in the shadow of a monster for decades and somehow retained enough humanity to orchestrate this final confession. Why did he never tell me? When he had me captive, when he was trying to break me, why didn't he use this? Because he was afraid. For the first time in 50 years, my husband was truly afraid. Not of you, but of what you represented. If you could know the truth and still reject him, still choose a different path, then everything he had become would be proven unnecessary. The darkness he had embraced, the humanity he had sacrificed, all of it would be rendered meaningless. She coughed, a harsh sound that rattled through her failing body. He let you go because he couldn't bear to destroy his own legacy. And he watched you rise because part of him, some buried fragment of the boy he used to be, was proud that his son was strong enough to defeat him. I walked to the window. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere across the country, in a maximum security prison, my biological father was locked in a cell. The man who had murdered my friend. The man who had tortured me for a year. The man whose blood ran in my veins. "I need to see him," I said. "One more time." The prison was exactly as grim as I expected. Gray walls, razor wire, the smell of disinfectant barely masking the smell of despair. They brought me to a visiting room with bulletproof glass dividing it in half. And there he was, Lazarus Vane, my father. He looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit. The silver hair was unkempt, the mercury eyes sunken. Prison had a way of stripping away the armor of the powerful. Stellan. His voice was rough, stripped of its smooth confidence. "You know." "I know. And you came anyway." I needed to understand. I needed to hear it from you. He pressed his palm against the glass. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That if I could go back, I would choose differently?" "You wouldn't believe me, and I'm not sure I would believe myself." "I want to know why. Not the philosophy, not the justification. Why you let me go. Why you watched me rise instead of crushing me when you had the chance." Lazarus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Because you were the only proof that I was ever human. Because some part of me remembered what it felt like to hope. Because when I looked at you, beaten and bloody and still refusing to break, I saw myself. Not who I became, but who I might have been. And I couldn't destroy that. Even I couldn't destroy that." I leaned close to the glass. "I am going to take everything you built and turn it into something good. Every penny that can be recovered will go to your victims. Every connection you forged will be severed. Every shadow you cast will be dragged into the light. Your legacy ends with you." I know. And there, in those mercury eyes, I saw something I had never expected. Acceptance. Maybe even relief. "That's why I let you survive, Stellan. Because I knew that if anyone could end this properly, it would be you. My son. My beautiful, unbreakable son." I stood up. There was nothing more to say. No reconciliation possible. No forgiveness deserved or offered. But something had shifted in my chest. Not love, not absolution, but perhaps understanding. Perhaps the recognition that monsters are made, not born, and that the same darkness that consumed him had been inside me all along. I had simply chosen a different path. As I walked out of that prison, Seraphina was waiting. Elias stood beside her, nervous and grateful and alive. Behind them, the sun was rising, spilling golden light across a world that suddenly felt bigger than I had ever imagined. I took Seraphina's hand. I embraced Elias like the brother he had become. And together, we walked toward a future that belonged only to us. The street rat had survived. The empire had fallen. And from the ashes of revenge, something unexpected had grown. Hope. The same hope my mother had been named for. The hope she had carried across the city, fleeing a monster, protecting a child she loved more than her own life. Esperanza. Hope. It had taken me 25 years to understand what she had given me. Not just life, but the capacity to choose what that life would mean. The strength to face any darkness and still reach toward the light. I am Stellan Vega. I am the son of a monster and the child of hope. I am the street rat who couldn't be broken, and this is only the beginning of my story. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, let me know in the comments below. And remember, no matter what darkness you carry, no matter what blood runs in your veins, you are defined by your choices. Every single day, you get to decide who you will become. Now subscribe, because there are more stories waiting to be told. Stories of redemption and revenge, of love and loss, of street rats who became kings and empires that crumbled to dust. Your story isn't over either. Neither is mine.